final webinar of 2023. And we are going to be exploring trends for 2024 that are set to shape the hotel sector. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Eloise Hanson. I'm the editor of hospitality here at Boutique Hotel News, and we're a trade publication covering the global boutique, lifestyle and luxury hotel industry. Our episode sponsor for today, or one of them, is Customer Experience Platform Alliance, and we have a short video to play for you today. Further details about Alliance have been popped into the chat there if you would like to learn more. And another sponsor of today's episode is asset management company London Rock Partners, and we have Claire on the call today to host a short introduction. So Claire, over to you.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for letting me join this session. We are very proud sponsors of these sessions, and they are always useful, so I'm sure today will be no different. I guess just to give you a bit of an overview, I'm the co-founder of London Rock Partners, and London Rock Partners was set up about 2.5 years ago, and it was really set up to fill a gap that we found in the market when it came to independent hotel owners looking for support in operationally and commercially running their businesses. We now support 12 hotels across the UK, a mixture of branded properties, so Hilton, IHG and Accor, as well as 6 independent hotels, 5 of which are in central London. So we have a broad experience, a big team, and we work with owners, investors, banks and funds who are either owning or co-owning a troubled, shall we say, hospitality asset. People don't come to us when the hotels are all rocking and rolling and going beautifully. They come to us when they need some support. So we're really keen to talk to owners, investors, banks and teams who need support as they look ahead into 2024. My details are all in the chat box. And like I said, look, these sessions are really informative, and I would encourage you to reach out to the other panelists and the other people that are on it, because I think together we can probably crack some of the big questions for next year. So thank you very much, Eloise.
Thank you so much, Claire. What a great note to end on, and further details about London Rock Partners have been popped into the chat there. So very quick overview of how today's webinar is going to run. We'll spend around 10 minutes in conversation with each of our panelists, exploring 5 of the trends that Boutique Hotel News is going to be sharing for 2024. And to give you a very brief overview of who we're going to be speaking with today, you can see our panelists up on your screen now. We've got lots to get through, so I'm going to crack on. First of all, coming to Lynne. Our first trend for today is profitability pressure. And I've got 2 screen grabs on your screens here of headlines that we've covered on Boutique Hotel News fairly recently. And I think it gives a pretty broad overview of where we're at in the market, with the likes of Firmdale reporting record London revenues, up 15% for its London portfolio, compared to some businesses that are very much struggling and have been placed into administration. So Lynne, let's talk about this, but I'm very keen to talk about this from a very positive angle. But before we do, Lynne, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi there. Thanks, Eloise, and hello, everybody. My name's Lynne Blakey. I'm a director in Evelyn Partners, which is a professional services and investment management firm. I've got a passion for hospitality, having spent 4 years prior to joining as FD of the Newton Somerset, which was a high-end luxury hotel and visitor attraction based in Somerset. So thank you very much for having me on, Eloise.
Thank you, Lynne. So to begin with, can we explore the challenges and what factors may present challenges to the bottom line in 2024?
No problem. Well, when thinking about the bottom line, you have to think about both your revenue and your cost side of things. So from a revenue perspective, we have been in quite a high inflation environment for a long time now. Now, wages are catching up with inflation, but people have been going through their savings. They've been spending the savings they built up in COVID. They have been relying on credit to do the things that they like to do. And actually, there is a bit of a shift in that. A recent survey by the ONS showed that 67% of people were thinking about cutting back on some of that discretionary spend. So it'll be interesting to see how that flows into the bottom line for hotels and the hospitality industry as well. Linked to that is the fact that interest rates are still high, and although these have started to flow through onto the sort of consumer market in terms of mortgages, there's actually, we only think about 20 to 25% actually hit the market yet. There's about 4 million households that are anticipated to have higher mortgage costs coming up, and 1.2 million mortgages renewing next year. Again, that puts pressure on consumers when they're looking to spend, and it means that hotels, service apartments, any hospitality business will have to work hard to kind of capture that discretionary spend that people have got remaining.
Mm-hmm.
From a sort of a cost perspective, the elephant in the room is obviously the minimum wage increase that's coming in April next year. I think everybody anticipated a minimum wage rise in the UK, but I don't think people anticipated a rise to sort of £11.44, which is nearly sort of 10%. And actually for for workers under 23, the rise is even more than that, because you're bringing 21 and 22-year-olds into the sort of full national living wage, and the rises for more younger employees are even more substantial. And I've been talking to a number of clients whom, as I said, had been anticipating something, but not at that level, and they've done their budgets for next year based on an £11 an hour minimum wage, and effectively they've had to rip those budgets up and start again. And it's not just the employees at that level. You've got to think about it. It's a knock-on effect right through your whole employee chain to make sure you've got the differentials within the wage, and it's an added pressure on businesses, which means that they have to either increase costs, increase sort of revenue elsewhere, or reduce other costs to try and make the same amount of money next year. Other couple of factors to sort of highlight as well is continuing food cost inflation. Food cost inflation for the last year has been running at higher than normal inflation and higher than the amount that sort of hotels and restaurants are able to sort of put onto their prices. If you just look at the figures from October, food and beverage inflation was at 10.1% compared to 4.6% of underlying inflation. So you can see there's still a gap there, which is putting a sort of a pressure on the bottom line, and I can't see that changing in 2024. And the final one I'd like to touch on is just interest rates. Obviously, interest rates are at the highest point, and while they've stabilised at the highest point they have been since sort of 2008, and a lot of businesses haven't had to cope with interest rates at that level before. And a lot of businesses have got more debt than they perhaps had 3 years ago with a number of COVID loans. So that's something that businesses are going to have to think about next year.
Then I'm going to wrap up 2 questions in one for you next, Lynne, if that's okay. You mentioned that hoteliers are going to have to start exploring additional revenue streams, and I'd like you to expand on that. So how can hoteliers look to maximise their cash flows then? And can you combine this by looking at tax and allowance or rate reliefs that hoteliers are entitled to?
Of course. I mean, hospitality is one of the most entrepreneurial industries. We all saw that in COVID, where people did different things to generate revenue and things like that. But for me, what's really important next year for businesses to maximise their cash flow is actually looking at their cost side of things. So what I would recommend all businesses do is really understand what their cost base is, and look at what those costs are and how they can reduce or eliminate them or change things to sort of generate more cash. Biggest thing to do is to have a look at your biggest overheads. So look at your really chunky costs, because that's usually where you can find some savings. Things like looking at things like maintenance contracts. Can you get better deals? Can you re-tender contracts, particularly if you've got a large property portfolio? Are you paying too much for your IT spend? Do you have lots of systems that you're potentially not using or aren't talking to each other effectively enough, or you've got too many users? So looking at those type of things to try and cut costs. Looking at having sort of control over discretionary sort of spend that you don't necessarily need. So look at your marketing spend and actually what sort of income are you getting from that spend? Could you be better using more organic social media approaches, which might be a bit cheaper than expensive sort of pay-per-click advertising? And also having really strong controls over spend within the business, in terms of if you get bad controls, that's when people make bad spending decisions. So the better controls you've got in your business to kind of control those costs, the better for your outlook. But a few sort of tricks I've kind of come up with recently in trying to help businesses with their cash flow, and linked to that sort of tax point as well. If you think about VAT, for example, what a lot of businesses do, they get quite a lot of invoices after their month end. You can actually accrue for those invoices in your VAT returns and get a one-off cash benefit to businesses. And it's something that a lot of businesses don't necessarily think about doing. And that one-off benefit can be quite substantial. It is just a timing difference. You pay the same amount of VAT overall, but rather than getting it in the next quarter, you can bring it forward a quarter, which can be quite attractive for businesses as well. Other things relating to VAT is around expenses. I've worked with a lot of businesses where their expenses systems aren't good enough to pick up the VAT on those expenses, and it means that you're not able to recover it. That's basically leaving cash on the table for businesses. Linked as well is business rates is another one. Obviously, we've seen that there's the hospitality relief is continuing for next year, but make sure you get it. It doesn't automatically get applied to rates bills, and I've actually seen businesses this year who are in the sector who weren't actually getting the reliefs that they were entitled to. So do have a look at your rates bill and make sure you're getting those reliefs. Rates as well for sort of slightly bigger businesses. The sort of multiplier is actually rising in line with inflation. So rates costs are actually going to go up before that relief kind of kicks into place. So it's important that have a look at your rates and get a second opinion on them. It's an area where, when I was in practice, actually in industry, I actually saved quite a lot of money by just getting some rates advice specifically on how to structure them, making sure that the rates we were paying were the right amount. So I do think it's worth having a second look at that sort of element of your business as well, and making sure you've got all the relief you're entitled to. For example, disturbance relief, if you've got like work going on outside your property, which is affecting the use of that property, you can sometimes get money back for that.
Thank you, Lynne. Very quick question before we move on to our next trend. As we only have about a minute left with you, Lynne, could I have your thoughts on one final question? I recently was at an event and I heard that there's less pressure to fill rooms to drive occupancy because ADRs are so high. And I just wanted to hear your final thoughts on that statement.
I mean, you're correct, ADR is much higher than it was pre-COVID, and it's been increasing all year. But occupancy rates have been holding up pretty well. The danger comes if those occupancy rates start to drop. I mean, I think everybody here accepts that from an accommodation perspective, it's better having one room at £500 than two rooms at £250. But actually, what you are losing out on is that discretionary spend of having extra people in the property. So I think it's really important that businesses model their business model effectively, like do sort of cash flow monitoring and profitability monitoring to actually understand what the impact of that actually is in their business given their specific business model. What I've seen a number of businesses doing is actually bundling packages up, so they're aware that people maybe aren't spending quite as much when they come onto site, so actually they're trying to lock that spend in up front by bundling packages in advance with like spa treatments, dinner, etc. So you're building that discretionary spend in already. So I suppose my comment on that is, yes, less pressure on occupancy rates, but don't forget that discretionary spend.
Thank you, Lynne. Thank you very, very much. I'll flag as well that all the LinkedIn profiles of our speakers are in the chat. So if you have any follow-up questions and you would like to learn more, please do connect and carry on that conversation. Let's move to our second trend today, and I am going to be speaking to Billy next, all about repositioning. Before I ask Billy to introduce himself, just a couple of headlines here that I want to flag. Zien Group has just launched its independent brand in Amsterdam, a new independent brand as part of the portfolio, which I understand Billy may flag in a moment, but this new brand forms part of the group's repositioning strategy of reinvesting and reimagining some of its hotels. And we've also seen news that PPHE has just received planning permission for a subterranean hotel within a hotel. In the 4 years that I've been with Boutique Hotel News, this is the first hotel within a hotel concept that I have come across. And it's quite an interesting one as part of repositioning strategies. So Billy, let's talk about this. Why don't you introduce yourself first?
Hi, my name is Billy. I'm the CEO of Zien Group. I joined the group about 1.5 years ago. We are a Dutch owner-operator. The group is 76 years old, so deep in some pretty rooted tradition, and kind of took the reign of the group to write its next chapter and reinvent some of its properties, and also use this as a launchpad for growth in continental Europe. Thanks,
Billy. So before, in fact, I'm going to do the same and sort of combine two questions into one here. I want to kick off by asking yourself, what are the underlying trends at this moment in time that make repositioning an attractive strategy? And where are the opportunities then to deliver greater value?
Well, I mean, you clearly, I hadn't seen that news of somebody trying to build a hotel below ground, rehabilitating existing real estate versus building new one makes a lot of sense, right? Especially when you're in city centers where basically, European city centers are museums, right? You can't typically build a new building, and most of the buildings are protected, so you almost don't have a choice but to reposition. Going below ground to build hotel rooms, that's another extreme, but that's interesting nevertheless. The other aspect of that, aside from kind of the investment thesis that reinvesting in buildings to kind of get higher rates and higher guest satisfaction makes sense, it also there are many hotels in Europe that are ripe for reinventions. Investing in hotels is an expensive game, and a lot of hotel owners that have been sitting on great real estate for many years have over invested, whether it's to modernize their building, to make them more energy efficient and everything that comes with that, or to create something that has more consumer appeal.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk to us about those opportunities then to deliver greater value? And is this investing in the amenities? Is it the bones and structure of the property? Is it going underground, adjacent parcels? Where are the opportunities here that you're seeing?
Well, I think when you're talking about repositioning of assets or using existing buildings that are typically non-purposed hotel built, right? They're office conversion, residential conversions, right? What that means is you have to embrace a lot of imperfections. And what that means is you cannot have one approach to every single building. So the first thing is to really understand what you have and what you can do with it. And I think where a lot of people are going wrong with positioning, whether it's in terms of design, amenity, or whatever it is, right, is they're trying to fit something that just doesn't fit within the real estate or that the bones that they're working with. Not every hotel should have a rooftop bar, and not every hotel can go below ground, right? After that, ultimately, any smart investor that's trying to reposition hotels is trying to achieve two things, right? One is, how do I create something that can put spotlight on my hotel that has consumer appeal? And equally, how can I do that by having the lowest operating costs that I can have in my hotel, right? And that holds true whether you're a 5-star luxury hotel or a budget hotel.
Can I ask what key lessons you've learned during your time repositioning hotels that actually informed your approach to do it successfully?
Well, no matter how much you learn from your mistakes, I'm always amazed how we always manage to make new ones. But ultimately, when you look at this word of repositioning, which a lot of the time I refer to as the washing machine process, right? You're trying to do a lot in a short amount of time of design and construction, and looking at efficiency of a building, looking how you're going to market a building, looking how you're going to operate a building, and how all those things kind of coming together are going to come on the other side to be something, again, right, that has consumer appeal and profitability. Ultimately, the things that I've learned over the years is the most important thing is to make decisions. I think what you're asked when you work in a world of imperfect, right? And is that the worst thing you can do is not make decisions and think that you can always wait till you have perfect information, whether it's on the building, whether it's on costs and so forth. And that, while you don't want to just make gut decisions and you need to make informed decisions, that part of the critical path of executing good repositioning is just making decisions. After that, I really go back to what I said at the start, right? Is really understanding the building that you have, the location, its potential, and really marrying ambitious but yet realistic aspiration for your repositioning are key. I am just seeing too many people either over or under invest or delivering products that feel kind of disconnected to the building, the bones, or the environment that was given to them, which that's the one thing they can't change.
And one might argue that to launch an independent brand in the current sort of economic climate is a very bold move to do so. And with that in mind, Billy, I want to ask you, final question, what do you think a brand means to the modern traveler?
Well, I wish we had more than a couple of minutes to discuss that, because that's a big question. Listen, there's no doubt I live and breathe this industry, and I can't keep up with the number of brands I get launched every day. So, sorry, I don't know what is happening behind me. Apologies. So clearly, there is a lot of new products out there. Equally, though, the ability for you to speak to your consumer directly has never been greater than it is today, right? Through, the obvious digital and social channels that exist. So, I think there's a lot of room to do great things in this industry. I think there's a lot of room to develop great products. I have to believe that because that's what I do. But I happen to truly believe it. I do think, a lot of the big brands, a lot of the time are launching a new brand with nothing but trying to solve that they're looking at a building that doesn't fit any of their existing brands. And I think that's a little bit of a dangerous game to play. But when you're trying to be innovative in creating things that make sense to the consumer, things that can drive profitability, if you genuinely put passion and honesty and hard work behind it, I think there's a lot of work for people to do some really cool stuff in our space.
Thanks, Billy. And I'm sure Boutique Hotel News will be keeping an eye on you and what you're up to next to see what innovative, cool thing you are going to be putting out in 2024. Thanks, Billy. let's move on to our third trend for today, and we're looking at responsible employment. Earlier in the year, in fact, it must have been only a month ago, maybe 2 months ago, covered a story of 11 arrests made at Marriott Regent's Park for illegal employment, and Marriott were very supportive in that situation and helped that process along. We also covered a report which examines how hospitality can deliver the S in ESG, which covers such things as modern slavery and ensuring that your staff members have a safe environment to work in. And to talk about this, we have Jim from UK Hospitality. So Jim, please introduce yourself first and foremost.
Thank you, Eloise. Hi, everyone. I'm Jim Cathcart. I'm Policy Director at UK Hospitality. We're the industry body representing the wider UK hospitality sector to government, the media and the public, formed about 5 years ago now to really sort of bring the industry together and sort of speak with one voice on behalf of the sector.
Thanks, Jim. I've just touched on modern slavery just a moment ago, and I understand that there's going to be some new updates to the UK legislation coming into effect next year. Could you please provide an update of what we can expect?
Absolutely, Eloise. So I think, first of all, just to sort of recap on what the current responsibilities are with regards to modern slavery. So the legislation itself came in 2015, as a lot of people will be aware. And in essence, if you are a incorporated business carrying on part or all of your business in the UK, if you've got an annual turnover of £36 million or more, then in essence you have to produce and publish a statement, a modern slavery statement, setting out how you are tackling modern slavery and human trafficking in your business and supply chain. And there's sort of 6 key areas that the government set out that you should be covering at a minimum in terms of that statement. And this also may have an impact on franchisees and franchisors as well. So that's sort of the current state of play. It really, if you meet those criteria, then the statement is sort of the obligation. Now, when the UK sort of published this, or this law came into effect back in 2015, it was a bit of a sort of pioneer trailblazer in that sense, driven by the Home Secretary at the time, Theresa May. Over sort of the years since, other jurisdictions have sort of brought in similar legislation or even taken it further. And there have been calls for the UK legislation to be expanded to reflect what's going on in other sort of supply chains and other markets as well. In terms of the law itself and changes upcoming, at the King's, what was the Queen's speech in 2022, a modern slavery bill was announced, and again, this hasn't actually come into sort of force yet, and there's still a TBC about when it actually will, as I understand it. But in essence, we can sort of divine what these changes might look like, and I think businesses, responsible businesses, will want to be sort of looking at this at the moment in terms of their current statements and making sure that they are delivering what they should do. But in essence, what the bill proposes or proposed was around strengthening some of those requirements around what's in the annual statement, modern slavery statement. It's around ensuring law enforcement agencies have more tools to tackle it. And it's also increasing and mandating sort of civil penalties and making certain offences specific criminal offences, which they are at the moment, which I understand it. So these are around knowingly or recklessly publishing a modern slavery statement that's false or incomplete, and continuing to source services from suppliers that fail to show minimum standards that they are protecting against modern slavery. So even though that bill hasn't gone through and there's no, as I understand it, sort of definitive date for these things to come in, I think we would recommend people reviewing their statements to keep them up to date as much as possible at the moment.
So on that note then, how can hoteliers specifically start to prepare now to ensure this compliance? I mean, when it comes into effect, like, what impact is this going to have on hotels and hospitality businesses?
I think in terms of the impacts, it's going to be around making sure, as I said, that you have strength in those statements. And I think there are sort of two elements to this. One is that obligation from a business perspective, that you are ensuring that your supply chain, that your business itself is doing all it can to ensure that modern slavery is it's not happening within the business. And that those statements and processes are in place to prevent it happening. There's also sort of the linked but slightly different element of within a hotel business. Modern slavery, even if it's not within your particular business or your particular supply chain, there could be modern slavery elements sort of happening within the business. And again, it's around strengthening that staff training, strengthening those processes to make sure you're covering off the whole piece there. So we as UKHospitality work closely with an organisation called the Shiva Foundation. Again, we can potentially send some links around post webinar, but we work with them, and they've produced a blueprint specifically for the hotel sector, just to sort of aid hoteliers just in looking at both modern slavery from your statutory reporting element, but also areas such as hotel layout, guest demographics, price points, location, around things to where to identify some other elements that you could strengthen your modern slavery statement as well. And I think that's well worth a look. And I think regardless of whether, what the law may be saying in the future, I think, for good, responsible hoteliers, it's worth revisiting your statements and making sure they're sort of fully up to scratch and fit for purpose.
Mm-hmm. On one of these stories that are on everyone's screens now about Marriott Regent's Park, the hotel at the time was working with an agency, and I understand that a lot of hoteliers at this moment in time, particularly with staffing shortages, will most likely be working with third-party agencies to staff their properties. And I'd like to finish off, Jim, with some advice. Like, when hoteliers suspect or maybe even identify potential instances of modern slavery within their workforce, how can this be addressed effectively? What do those steps look like?
First instance, Eloise, I think if anyone's in immediate danger, then it should be a police issue. So the advice is from government, call 999, or if it's less urgent, 101. There are also a number of mechanisms in place for businesses and employers to get further advice, but also report any concerns they have. So there is a modern slavery helpline, which is specifically set up for that reason, for employers, hoteliers, whoever it might be, to go to if they suspect anything in the supply chain, anything suspicious. Then there's that helpline there. There's also a sort of business-led multi-stakeholder initiative called Stronger Together, which was launched back in 2013, a couple of years before the law came into effect. And again, this is a toolkit specifically for businesses to answer exactly the questions that you set out there, which is around, okay, so I've got my statement, I've got my processes in place, but if I suspect something is going wrong here, where do I go to? And the Shiva Foundation as well, I mentioned before, which has a specific hospitality focus. So in terms of advice to hoteliers, if there's a danger to life, then it's straight to the police. Otherwise, there's that specific Home Office endorsed helpline, and there's also the business-led toolkit as well to help out operators.
Thanks, Jim. After this webinar, I'll follow up with you separate, actually, to get those links and guidelines, if you don't mind. If anyone should be in need of them, I'll come equipped and see what I can do to help out. So thank you, Jim. Let's move on to our fourth trend for today. And here we're going to be talking about solo travel. And in fact, this was something that I have been seeing amongst my friendship group. I've been watching them from afar travel the world completely solo, and this is often young women, if I may. And I got thinking, and it took me, I thought there's something here. Did my research, and in fact, all the trends seem to be suggesting that yes, solo travel is absolutely on the rise. And on your screens now, this is actually a screen grab from a survey by the solo traveller, and its 2023 survey where respondents actually replied to say that more than 50% plan to take 2 or more solo trips in 2024. So to me, that almost says that we're done. We know solo travel is going to be big in 2024, but to talk more deeply about this, I've got Tracey Nesbitt on the call. So Tracey, if you could please introduce yourself.
Yes, I'm the editor of Solo Traveler, which is the premier digital publication on traveling solo. So we've been around for about 14 years. We publish tips and advice on how and where to travel solo every week. And we also have a large community of solo travelers who share tips and suggestions and encouragement. And we have about 275,000 people in our Facebook group, which is very active, and they're always sharing information with each other. And we write for both those who travel solo independently and those who join organized tours as solo travelers. And so for those people, we also maintain a list of tours and cruises with no or very low single supplements.
Mm-hmm. So could you talk to me about the trends then that are actually underpinning the rise of solo travel? What is causing this to become so popular?
Well, one of the things that happened, and quite unexpectedly, was the impact of the pandemic. And while it certainly created demand for all types of travel, the numbers seem to be particularly high for solo travel. So maybe all of that enforced togetherness contributed to a desire for some alone time. But it also created a desire in people to not put off their travel dreams because we now have very specific experience of the fact that the ability to travel could be taken away at any time. So some of those numbers will be people who had been waiting for friends or family to be ready to travel with them to the places they wanted to go when they wanted to go, and they have now decided to go alone to make sure that they get the trips that they want. Also, at least in Canada, we're living in a time in history. Statistics Canada reports that there have never been more single-person households at any time in history. So it stands to reason that a lot of those people might also travel alone. But on the flip side of that, we're also now seeing a lot of couples where each partner travels solo at least some of the time. So yeah, it's a lot of a real combination of factors.
That brings me very nicely on to my next question, Tracey, is that are you seeing any shifts in the demographic of the solo traveller, and which destinations are actually proving popular to travel solo?
From what we can see, as well as our, anecdotally, our own experiences, far more women travel alone than men. And they do it a lot more frequently. So there's also, at this particular time, a very large number of women over 50 with the time and the money to travel, and they're really seizing the opportunity in a way that they never have before. And our readers continue to travel well into their 80s. So from that, starting from the time that they have an empty nest, or they may be outliving their partners, and they may be retired, so they have fewer responsibilities holding them at home, so they have the flexibility also to be able to travel. In terms of destinations, in our survey this year, we have been doing this survey for a number of years. And this year, Europe remains the most popular destination by far. But there were a couple of surprises this year. For the first time ever, the United States was number 2. Now, because of the demographics of our readers, we assume that the bulk of that US travel is likely domestic. but also for the first time ever, Southeast Asia was in the top 3. But Europe always, every year, is the most popular destination. We don't really drill down any further into specific countries, but I think that people find it an easier, generally an easier place to travel than, say, Asia. So it's really, yeah, it never never fails to be a popular destination for our readers.
Mm-hmm. And given that either, you know, majority of your readership are either sort of solo female travelers, with that does come questions around safety and security. And I'd be curious to hear, Tracey, if in your opinion, you have any thoughts as to what the industry could do better to support solo travelers, not just females only, but any solo traveler taking a trip.
Something that has been coming up a lot lately is, and I think some of it is fueled by the media and, stories that kind of grab people's attention. I don't know actually how frequently this happens, but there's a lot of concern about, particularly for women, when they're checking in, that they take the key, that someone can overhear that they're staying alone and overhear their room number being said, and worried about being followed, or that someone might know that they're there on their own. So one of, a little, I guess, some sensitivity on that, on that end is up. Another thing that is often a challenge for women traveling alone in an unfamiliar destination is what to do in the evenings. So if there are if there are things going on in a hotel in the evening, that's great. It means they don't have to travel after dark. They don't have to figure out how to get around. The one thing that I encountered at a hotel once is that they had kind of a happy hour specifically for solo travelers. So they sort of put out some appetizers, and they had a special on a couple of drinks, and they encouraged people who were traveling alone to mingle with one another. And I thought that was brilliant, because it's can be, even if you're not a very outgoing person, to go to something like that, you're bound to meet someone. And I assume for the hotel it's good as well, because I'm spending more of my money there. So so a bit of a win-win.
And on that note, Tracey, actually, final question for you. How do you think hoteliers can better attract and capture demand from solo travelers? If we can see that the trends are pointing to the fact that it's going to rise or continue to rise throughout 2024, where are the opportunities for hotels to capture that demand?
One of the things that we hear a lot is the fact that there are not always a lot of single rooms, single occupancy rooms in hotels. And although I understand that the cost of the room is the cost of the room, people complain that, well, I'm only one person. Why am I paying the same as 2 people? And on tours, the single supplement, the tour companies blame that on the hotels. So it, in some places, I mean, I have stayed in hotels, particularly I'm thinking of in London, where they have had single rooms, and it has been perfect, and the price has been less than a larger room. But that's something that people complain about a lot. So I think that anywhere where there's an opportunity to reduce the costs somewhat for people who are traveling alone will be very popular. And as you showed in the slide, our people are planning to travel more and for longer periods of time, in contrast to what we hear in other parts where people are saying that because the costs are higher, they're not traveling as much. Our people seem to be traveling even more. And in 2023, there was a 67% increase in the number of solo travelers spending $3,000 to $4,000 US on a 1-week trip, and an 80% increase in the number spending more than 4,000. So we have a fairly, I would say, affluent readership, but they're also very cost conscious because they're traveling for longer periods of time. So that's the only thing that actually comes into my head right away, because really hotels, we hear from people all the time how staff at hotels have gone above and beyond for them because they're solo travelers. So really the only thing I can think of in terms of something that people mention over and over again is the cost issue.
Yeah. Thank you, Tracey. Thanks for sharing those insights. We're now on to our final trend of today's session. And Tracey, you just mentioned hotel rooms and then single occupancy hotel rooms. So this is quite a nice segue, in fact. Concept hotel rooms is something that I am seeing a hell of a lot of, particularly this idea of a deconstructed hotel, which, as we can see on your screens, the Toni calls itself a deconstructed hotel. And this is the idea that hotel rooms now exist outside of the traditional bricks and mortars. It's tree houses, shepherd's huts, cabins, cottages, you name it, all existing outside of the hotel. In fact, these rooms are the hotel. Another example here, another underground hotel, actually. In fact, maybe I should have added underground hotels as a trend for 2024. But Zedwell Tottenham Court Road, in fact, the Zedwell brand creates pods, sleeping pods. And the whole idea is that the rooms are designed to induce the perfect night's sleep. To talk about concept hotel rooms, we have Toni on the webinar. So Toni, over to you, please, to introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, I'm Toni Black. I'm one of the interior directors here at Blacksheep. So we are an interior design company, and we design high-end hospitality as well as casual dining. So we have an F&B team and a hospitality team here at Blacksheep.
Thanks, Toni.
And a brand team. I can't forget my brand team. They'll kill me as well.
well added. So let's talk about traveling, changes in travel behavior. I mean, we've kind of heard from Tracey, for example, how solo travel is very much now on the rise. So how are changing traveler tastes influencing your approach, Toni, to designing hotel rooms?
Well, I tell you what, in the last 5 years, so much has happened, right? Should I say that big C word? COVID. People have changed their perception of luxury, that new word. What is luxury? Is luxury really luxury? Everybody has a different want and need. And I think that has changed, and COVID has changed people's thoughts on what they sometimes believed was luxury and what they want now. And what I found in the last few years, that everybody is not just going for a place because it's beautiful. People want experiences now, and it's what that hotel room or that hotel can bring from experiential point of view. And I think, like what Tracey was saying, a lot of people are traveling, and a lot of people are willing to spend that extra to have that ultimate moment. And that's what we're finding quite a bit with designing hotel rooms and hotel spaces, actually, that people's perception of luxury and what they want in terms of finishes is completely different. I think a lot of spaces, people like more tactility, and it's more about comfort, more so than having a beautiful stone or this one-off piece. You know, it's all about the moment that they're going to have within that space. And it's not just about taking that picture, it's about experiencing the place more so.
Mm-hmm. I've actually heard that again, open to debate here, that hotel rooms are actually getting smaller because there's so much more emphasis on the experiential side, that guests are now looking to explore more of the hotel property itself and looking at the sort of additional amenities and the cultural programming that is now being offered on site. And I've during my short overview of some context slides, we've covered a whole number of concept rooms on Boutique Hotel News, your shepherd's huts, your tree houses, your gaming rooms, your wellness suites. Toni, what do you anticipate to be popular in 2024?
Well, if I had a crystal ball, I tell you, but you know what, I think, again, harking back to different experiences, people like limited editions and in collaboration with, like now in the world of design, like you've got a lot of people, a lot of companies who you would least expect to collaborate with. And I think what would be nice, or what I can see going forward, is more of those exclusive one-off rooms, like where you have a hotel, but you've got 6 rooms that are, I don't know, with the latest fashion designer or a tennis player or somebody, so that you can, it's about creating those experiences, but more exclusive, right? That people want to, that are more sought after. So I think that possibly moving into next year, we've had lots of inquiries ourselves where people want to think out the box and create these little extra different moments. So I think more limited editions and more in collaboration with, possibly moving forward into 2024.
That ties in so nicely with my next question, because we're talking about unique concepts, those one-off exclusive concepts, and with that, I think, comes a balance of trying to make an exclusive product offering as inclusive as possible to appeal to a wider traveler demographic. So how do you creatively balance that exclusivity with the inclusivity?
It's easier with some of the soft brands to do that because there's probably less red tape. What we're finding is a lot of brands are rethinking how can we become more current and how can we move forward. And we always hark back to creating a strong narrative and a purpose. And I think in some places, it's about bringing that community in and bringing that community, that people, place and culture within a space. And that's how you can create this exclusive balance, but almost working in partnership with the locals and giving a place a more grounded sense of place. And I think by doing that, then that can help with the design concept and the narrative, and again, how you activate the space and creating these different activation experiential moments within the space as well.
And a final question for you, Toni, is again going back to these. They're almost room categories rather than sort of room design. Is that we've an example being I'm seeing hotel rooms now that have bunk beds, which are very much closely aligned with the hostel sector, co-living sector. So with that in mind, where are the opportunities to draw inspiration for new room designs and room categories from different sectors?
Well, I think it's going back to, we talk about the solo traveler and everything else. So I think it's people want, and I keep going back to it, like people want an experience. So it's, we've currently had a hotel concept where a lot of people are interested in railways, and we're bringing that experience within the room. So it's creating these unique different spaces that people, trends that people are into. It's a room on art, a room on fashion, everybody's ever evolving, and it's creating bringing those different experiential moments within the space that I think really helps. And when you talk about the bunk bed and the hostels and the travelers, it's people are traveling and working, and that's what we're seeing more of. And it's making sure that you have spaces that are inclusive, that you can work, you can travel, but you're also experiencing something. So there's a lot of boxes that we've got to tick now that everybody's out in the world and wants to just move around, and you can take your laptop and we're all on Teams and Skype and Zoom more often.
Something that I've actually seen come back is this whole idea of interconnecting rooms, which does, whether you're does go against a little bit of the solo traveller, but it's this idea that families are now travelling more together, or groups that are travelling, and we're seeing interconnecting rooms now being added back into the mix.
Airbnb is probably like a killer for hotels, but I think one thing that we can take from that is, like in the lockdown, that was probably the only way you could go with your family, and it's creating those spaces that you can connect within a hotel room, so you have the best of both worlds, right? So you can go, it's a home away from home, where you can be within a room, feel like you're having the hotel experience, but then feel that you have a sense of nostalgia and a sense of place and a sense of home. I find that a lot of families love to travel, but the first thing they complain about is the space of a room. It's not multifunctional. It's how do we have everybody within a space? But I think within hospitality, what we're finding more of is that people want to go in, but we're having to design spaces that have a little bit of nostalgia, have the things and the things that connect you to home, but also having that sense of we have the luxury of being within a hospitality space.
Thanks, Toni. In fact, whilst I'm here, I'm going to thank all of our panelists, to Toni, to Jim, to Tracey, to Billy, and to Lynne. We've absolutely rattled through our 5 trends, and we are fast approaching our allotted hour. So thank you once again. I just have some closing slides to run through, and I'm going to take this opportunity to flag our first webinar back in January 2024. We're going to be talking about dishing out F&B operational excellence, quite a tricky area of hospitality to be in at the moment. So we'll be uncovering some tips and tricks on what hospitality businesses can do within the space. Would love to see you there. Please register by using the link into the chat. We also are hosting our in-person event Recharge, which moves to a different European city every year on the 22nd and 23rd of January. We're going to be in Belfast, held at the Room 2 Net Zero Carbon Hotel, which is supported, the event itself is now supported by Visit Belfast and the UKAA. So tickets are on sale. Again, would love to see you in person. And carry on all the conversations that we've been having throughout our webinar series. And if you're interested in working with us, either across our digital or in-person events, please get in touch with my colleagues Rav or Piers. Their details are up on your screen. So all that's left for me to do today, say thank you to our panelists, thank you to our sponsors. I'm wishing you all a very Merry Christmas, and I hope to see you very soon in the new year on the first webinar back. Thanks and take care. Bye, guys.
Hello, we are International Hospitality Media, or IHM for short. IHM is the #1 brand to engage with decision makers in hospitality and real estate. Our 4 multimedia brands lead their respective sectors with breaking news, comments, trends, and opinion across a variety of multimedia solutions. We provide an inspirational community to connect people through world-class events, webinars, podcasts, award schemes, and much more. But let us share our story of who we are and what we do. Over 10 years ago, Piers and George had a light bulb moment to provide expert opinion, comments, and low-cost digital content. And so they went on a journey over the past decade, creating media platforms to serve the hospitality and real estate industries. We now have an engaged audience with a reach of over 60,000 monthly visitors across our website, 48,000 of our email database across all the sectors, and over 67,000 across our social channels. Everything we do believe in challenging the status quo. We believe in thinking differently. We make things simple and very easy to work with us. And we're a friendly bunch too. We offer creative solutions to help you achieve your business goals. Read, watch, listen, meet with IHM. Contact us for a chat today. Just look at some of the brands we have worked with recently.